So I think we just got where it was we were going recently. The big watch that we have been looking at for a while, the kind of the furthest reach of that watch was January 14 and 15. And this was fundamentally because we saw that we were in the 23,925th month since the month that Jesus died and rose. And we believed that that number was planned by God as a tribute to the beginning of the 7 years, the final 7 years leading up to the second coming on September 23 of 2025. September 23, 2025 was when the rapture process began. It's when the 1290 plus the 1260 days of the last 7 years began. Its importance can't be overstated, right? That is the reason why 2025 was so hugely significant. That is why the time in which Israel was 77 years old was 2025 into the spring of 2026. So for God to create a situation where there's a tribute to that via a number, a significant number, we believe God does those kinds of things for those who are watching. So I was watching that whole month, which began with the beginning of modern Hanukkah on December 14, and it's extended all the way to January 14 because it was April 14 of 32 AD that commenced the month in which Jesus died and rose with the blood moon on that day. And we know that for sure. So I've been watching ultimately toward this point, and it just so happens that on January 14, yesterday, Wednesday, something absolutely huge happened in light of what we've been watching with the Exodus rapture process. You have to recall what I put out on, I think it was January 1 of 2026. There's a video with very important information. Go review that if you can, because I talk about how the Gaza peace plan, Trump's Gaza peace plan, is the covenant with many nations that the Antichrist will be strengthening for the whole 7 years, right? And he, in fact, began strengthening it on September 23, 2025, just as soon as Trump first announced it outside of his own administration to anybody. And then it was publicly announced on September 29, 2025, and we've been in phase 1 of the Gaza peace plan, of his 20-point plan, ever since, until January 14, at which point the Trump administration, through Witkoff, announced the beginning of phase 2. And phase 2 is the part of the story where there is established a Palestinian technocratic administration of the Gaza Strip. And it's going to be known as the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, or NCAG. And this is effectively going to divide Israel. It's going to divide God's land, because you're going to have a multinational committee administering a big swath of territory in Israel. And that's going to ultimately lead to, according to the document, the peace plan, the whole territory being turned over to the Palestinian Authority once they've completed various reforms, which of course they probably won't do, but it's still going to get handed to them because that's the big agenda here. And of course, this is something the Antichrist can get behind, because that's exactly what God doesn't want. He doesn't want his land split up and part of it given to his enemies, right? And yet that's exactly what's happening under this Gaza peace plan. And the whole world is for it. Everybody agrees. This is great, except potentially Hamas. But even Hamas said on Wednesday, on January 14, that they're going to cooperate with the setting up of this technocratic Palestinian Authority. Of course, they're not going to disarm unless somebody forces them, but it was huge. It was absolutely huge. So I didn't see that coming. But that is definitely bigger than the near attack on Iran that just happened last night. Of course, that was important too. And that's still going somewhere. We're going somewhere with that. The aircraft carrier strike group from the South China Sea is racing toward the Middle East right now. As of yesterday night, Trump ordered that. So more firepower is coming to that region at the expense of Taiwan, I guess. Kind of leaving a big opportunity for China. But we're bearing down on Iran still, and something is going to happen, I think, after the World Economic Forum that Trump is about to attend. Anyway, we're not watching all of that so much as we are watching the development of this covenant with many, which is the only thing really the Bible says about the full 7 years of the end. When you hear the term tribulation, what that actually refers to is the last 3.5 years. Biblically speaking, it's about the last 3.5 years. But there are 7 years at the end leading up to the second coming, and what we know about those is basically one thing. We know a couple of things, but it's all based on one verse, Daniel 9:27. And in this verse, it says that the Antichrist is going to be strengthening or confirming, those words mean the same thing, a covenant with many, whatever that is, presumably many nations, for 1 week. And so that 1 week is the 7 years. And then in the midst of the week, he's going to cause the temple services to cease. And that's something else we know. So we know that there's going to be a third temple built in this first 3.5 years. So that is that's indicating that we're going to have a very different situation very soon in the Middle East. And my goodness, things are moving fast there, so I can totally see that happening. What I cannot see happening is a World Cup in 2026. And so if we get to that point without the rapture, we need to remember what Jesus told Joshua was, there will be no World Cup 2026 because the world will not be business as usual for those who are left behind. And you have to understand that even though most people, when they hear that, they think, oh, that means the rapture has already happened, so people have been left behind. It doesn't have to mean that because it's spoken by God. When he looks at the world, he sees people who are left behind because he already knows the future perfectly. And he can see that some people are the left behind, some are not the left behind, even though the rapture hasn't happened yet. So he's speaking, he's saying that the world will not be business as usual for people who are fixing to be left behind is what we would say, but God can say they are left behind because he knows. So because I believe that the thing that made the time at which Israel was 77 years old so special, the thing that made 2025 so special has already happened. It was September 23, 2025, the beginning of the rapture process, the beginning of the 1290 plus 1260 days of the full 7 years of the end, the beginning of that covenant with many being strengthened by the Antichrist, who is, according to Joshua as well, coming out of Saudi Arabia, so very likely MBS. And yeah, and here we are with the beginning, effectively, of the division of God's land into a part presided over, ruled over by a technocratic committee of many nations, and Israel is presiding over the rest of it. So, wow. Yesterday was huge. January 14 was huge. And we were looking forward to it for the rapture. Of course, that didn't happen. But when God points you forward to a massive watch date, the thing is, he's often doing so for the purpose of highlighting a big turning point in world history. God is, of course, pointing us forward to dates that pass without the rapture. But he wants us to check those dates for the rapture because there's something to see there along with looking for the rapture, right? And as I've said before, we're in this multi-step treasure hunt for the rapture with God. He points us forward to a date, says, look for the rapture at this time. We look because we know someday it's going to be the rapture, the date that he's pointing forward to. It's so exciting. But if we don't find it, at that time, he comes to us in a special way. At the time of the high watch, he comes to us in a special way. He says, okay, I got something new for you to look forward to. And therefore, we're getting the times at which to anticipate from the Lord. We're walking with God through these steps, so to speak, right? These watch date steps. This is how we're walking with God to the rapture, just like Enoch did. The Bible says he walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. It's going to be the same way with the people at the end of the world that get raptured. We are going to be walking or watch dating our way to the rapture with God, not because we're watching some guy on YouTube, but because God is giving us things to look forward to. And it's okay if we don't all agree on what to look forward to next. That's perfectly fine. But I think eventually we're going to come into agreement on the watch date, the way we did with September 23, 2025. There's huge agreement in the Watchman community that that was the day of the rapture. And that was awesome. So I think that's going to happen again. And I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm looking forward to now. I think we're going to have a little bit of time before we have a super high watch again, because it's a little bit before we get down to Purim and Passover, Shavuot. And so those are going to potentially be very high watch. I don't know. I don't know what God is going to say to me about looking forward to those times, but I anticipate especially Passover being very high watch in April, and potentially Shavuot if we get that far. But I want to tell you something even deeper that I'm looking at that to me is even more profound. So back in very late 2024, I began to watch January 9 through 11 for various reasons at that time. And it ended up being a very high watch to me personally, January 9 through 11 of 2025. And when it passed, I concluded that the reason God had pointed so heavily to those dates for me was because they represented a very important 9/11, right? Such as September 11, 2001, something like that, right? That was coming up, and that would be the time of the rapture. And I looked and I noticed that Feast of Trumpets 2026 begins on the date September 11. And I thought, wow, that's incredible. That is just incredible. So I began to suspect, even expect, I would say, that the rapture would happen on the Feast of Trumpets of 2026. And I even stopped watching other dates for a long time. And the thing that got me back into watching dates before that time was the announcement Joshua made and everything that's ensued with that. And that's changed my perspective a bit. And I'm not at all giving up on the concept that we're in a rapture process that began back on September 23 of 2025. But what I am doing is I'm looking back before that and I'm saying, wait a minute, did God actually tell me what to really look at for the day that we get caught up to heaven so long ago? And then here we come down to 2026, and I experienced the same massively high watch from January 9 to January 11, as you know. It was incredible, right? And I was surprised it didn't happen at that time. So we get past that, and I'm thinking, wow, it's happened now 2 years in a row, January 9 through 11. What is this pointing forward to? The 9th through the 11th day of the year. And here we are in 2026. It's already complete fireworks from the beginning of the year till now. And can we make it as far as September 11 of 2026 before the rapture happens? Well, of course we can, if God wills. He's in control of what happens. This is not some random chaos. This is as God wills, right? That's what's happening in the world. So think with me, okay? If we get all the way to when the World Cup is scheduled, and it doesn't happen, and of course it will not happen. Jesus told that to Joshua, right? I believe that. World Cup's not going to happen, but most people don't know that. They are totally expecting World Cup to happen. It was unthinkable back last summer when Jesus told Joshua there would be no World Cup in 2026. That was unthinkable, that somehow it would be canceled. But now its cancellation is already shaping up. Its cancellation is already in view. Already, almost 17,000 people have been reported to have canceled their World Cup tickets because they decided not to travel to the U.S. due to the risky situation. People are not happy with Trump, guys, already. And he hasn't even taken over Greenland yet and bombed Iran yet, right? But he's going to do both those things, I believe, and many other things that people aren't going to like this year. So, I mean, we already got all kinds of riots springing up in the U.S. over the ICE situation. And yeah, people are canceling their tickets right and left. So you can already see this happening. World Cup 2026 is not going down in the U.S. And I believe it's not happening at all due to the overall world situation by that time. When that eventuality is visible to all, it will empower, potentially, the understanding that we are in a rapture process as announced by Joshua Malekla. And you're going to see a surge in excitement for a rapture on Feast of Trumpets like has never existed before, coming up to 9/11 of 2026. So I want to be the guy that's already saying this here in January of 2026, that we can actually tentatively look forward to that day for the rapture of the church. Now, I'm not going to stop watching dates just because I'm looking forward to that. I could be wrong about that. Rapture could happen well before, and that's fine. And I never really count on my own theory, but I do definitely have powerful theories, try and reason things out. I believe God is working with me in all of this, and he ultimately ends up pointing me through the theory to something very special that I need to learn something from or learn something at, and that's what just happened recently. I was pointed forward to January 14, and what I found at January 14 was the next big step in the covenant with many that is being strengthened by the Antichrist. And that's just incredible, guys, to have anticipated that. And so this whole experience has been confirmed to me, and I'm so excited. Now, that being said, what do I want to do with this channel in the future? Well, it's been pretty intense. I've been putting out videos and updates and big posts like almost daily. And yeah, I'm a guy with, a family, a full-time job, I've got little kids, and I'm an expat in Iceland here. So it turns out every year there's a lot of paperwork to do at the beginning of the year for taxes and this and that and the other. So I got some chores to do, and I think I need to take a good long break from YouTube completely. And so I've decided I feel good about this. I feel impressed to do this today by the Lord to just let you know I'm taking, in my thinking, it's going to be probably at least 2 months of break because, we're kind of in a lower watch season, right? Until we get at least to Passover. And I just want to take a break, spend my free time with God, with family, kind of thinking about everything. I'm still going to be watching, and I may even have watch dates that I don't tell you about and before I get back here. But I do plan to come back to YouTube. Now that's just my plan. Maybe you'll never see me again until heaven because the rapture is happening or whatever. I follow God, so I don't know the future. But I do plan to come back bigger and better, so to speak, whatever that means. And we're going to watch definitely Feast of Trumpets 2026. That's for sure. I really plan on that if we get that far. And I may come back long before that, of course. In fact, it's likely that we will come back here and watch Passover. That could be the time. And I have some pretty awesome personal reasons I already can think of why that may be truly the time we get raptured there at Passover. Or Shavuot. That's also something that I could find very high watch. And before that, I'm just going to let you guys have your watches, and I'm going to have my watches, and we're going to see if we get raptured at a time that we didn't really foresee. That would be cool as well. But yeah, I'm really thinking we're going to get all the way to Feast of Trumpets of 2026, fundamentally. And that's kind of the thought. And I do not believe it's possible whatsoever to go beyond that, and here's why. Because Esther, she was raptured into the king's facilities, the harem, in Tibet, and 12 months later, she was brought into the king's presence, right? There was 12 months of beauty preparations for Esther before she was actually brought to her night with the king. And so wouldn't it be cool if we had a 1-year Exodus rapture process leading up to the event where we're brought into the presence of the king, just like Esther did? That would be really awesome. So I don't think it can go longer than that because I think there was a very good reason that it was Feast of Trumpets that Joshua pointed forward to last year. It's because that was the fulfillment of Feast of Trumpets, in a sense, right? That was the big declaration, the big blast of the trumpet, right? That alerted us And then we have a whole year until we actually get there, potentially. But we don't have longer, because that would mean that what happened the last Feast of Trumpets is kind of invalidated by what's going to happen this Feast of Trumpets, and so on. I really, really doubt that's the situation. So this is it, guys. It's going to happen this year. 26 is the number of God. It's the gematria of God in English. It's the gematria of Yahweh in Hebrew. This is it. 26 is it. I even live at the street number 26. I think that's pretty cool. So we're so excited. And let me give you the context to that. My first street address that I owned, the apartment that I owned first ever in life, was at street address number 7. Now I own a house at street address number 26. 726. So this is it, guys. It's time to just step back, take a break, do lots of chores, put my house in order, get ready for some crazy intensive watching in the future, some months from now, likely. But we'll see what happens. We're just following God. We're not going to do our own will here. That's the plan. It's all about walking with God, stepping with God, watch dating with God until he raptures us. God bless. Oh, and one more thing. If you made it this far in the video, you're probably quite interested in my content, and there is quite a bit of it that you may not have noticed. I have a website, and I'm going to put the link to that website in the description box. And there is on that website 2 major documents. There's one big document. It's basically a booklet. And then there are 2 papers I wrote. The 2 papers have everything to do with my understanding of the gospel, and the book that I wrote was my understanding of eschatology. And that booklet was written back in early 2025. It is still perfectly relevant, even with all that I've learned currently. So it's really, really fundamental to my thinking, and you're going to learn a lot from it, I think, if you'll read through that. And then I have a very significant video that I made back in 2021. It's on my channel. I'm going to put a link to that in the description box as well. It's about the seal square. And this is just an exciting gift that God gave me of understanding. It's a mathematical geometric entity that is just so incredible. And just see what you think, guys. It's a short video, but I think you're going to like it a lot. So I wanted to highlight those. I may end up actually making private a lot of the videos that I've made, so that I leave up on the channel the most important ones that present the rapture process, that present how we got into this with watching with Joshua. The early videos, they should all stay, and also the ones that especially prove the rapture process. And I'll just filter out some of the videos that those watches have already passed. They're not as relevant.